Today's lesson is on using graphs to make predictions, and this will cover pages 99 and 100 in your Jump Math book. The first question is going to give you a graph and a table of values. So they're going to ask you to use the graph to fill in the table of values and all the different empty spaces. So all you have to do is look at your graph and line things up. So we notice that in black, there's already the parts that they have filled in on both sides. So x, y, 1, 0 is marked, 4 and 3 is marked, and 7 and 6 is marked. So now we just need to look at the other values. So if we have an output of 1, now remember that our input is across the bottom and our output is up the side. So when I have an output of 1, that's an output in the y-axis, it matches here, so I can add a dot there. And the x value that it corresponds with is 2, so that's what I'm going to put into my output value. My next missing piece is an input value of 3. So if I look at my input of 3, the line matches up here, so I can put a dot, and that corresponds with an output value of 2, so then I'll just go and fill that in. 4 and 3 we already have marked, so our next one is an output of 4. So remember, I have to look at the correct side. So my output, y-axis, 4, I'll put a dot on the line, and that lines up with 5, so I'd put 5 as my input, and now I have a 6 in the input, so I have to start down here. 6, here's where it matches the line, and that corresponds with 5, so I will write with an output of 5. 7 and 6 they've already taken care of, so my last one's just an input of 8. So I'll draw my dot where it matches up, and that lines up with 7 in the output. For question number 2, they will also give you a graph, but instead of giving you a table of values, they have only partially created the line, and your job is to extend the line and find the value of the 11th term. So to do this, you will take your ruler, and I don't know whether my ruler shows up on here or not, but you're going to line it up with the line that they've already drawn in your textbook, and then you're going to continue that line and extend it to the end of your graph. So now once you've done that, you can just look at so if they want the 11th term, remember that's the term value, so we need to look at the term number. All the first, second, third, fourth, 11th, those are on the bottom. So if we go up, we can see, I know my line's not perfect, it's not perfectly matching up there, but if I had a perfect line, it would line up with 16. So then I would go over and write 16 as my 11th term. So one thing to notice as well is that the scale has changed. It's not going up by 1, it's going up by 2s. So you might notice that some of the graphs have a different scale than previous ones. Question number 3 has a bit of a paragraph of instructions. So I've just broken that down into point form. So they say for each sequence, so I've given us an example sequence, make a table of values for the term numbers and the term values. Draw a graph for your table and extend the graph to the value of the 7th term. So to begin with, we need to make our table. Now in your instructions, it says to make a table of values for term numbers and term values. So that's why I gave them these titles. And remember, the term number always goes on the left, and it's just, is this the first number, the second number, the third number, what order is it in? And the term values go on the right. So our term numbers would go 1, 2, 3, 4, because there are 4 numbers. And our term values would just be the order. So 4, 7, 10, and 13. So our next step is to make our graph. Now you might notice when I've made my graph that I've only made my term numbers go up to 9. I've made it quite a bit shorter than my term values because I'm just looking at the 4th term is 13, so it's going to keep going up to the 7th term. So just in case, I've extended this and made it a little bit longer, but I know my term numbers won't need to go past 7. So my first job is to draw the graph. So I need to figure out. So I'm looking at term number 1 and a term value of 4. So my term number is on the x-axis, my term value is here. So I will mark a dot at 1 and 4. Then I will look for 2 and 7. So here's my term value of 2. I'm going up to 7. Now, I am going up by even numbers and this is an odd number, so I'm actually just going to put it halfway between those two, between 6 and 8, because it should be about halfway between. Now you notice I've made that a little bit lighter so that when I'm connecting it, I'll use my dots that tend to go right across. Like if I look at 3 and 10, it's going to go right where they cross. So I'll make sure when I'm lining it up with my ruler that these 2 points match up and it passes through that little dot. But if the little dot might be a little bit off, then I'm not too worried. My last point is 4 and 13. So once again, I'm going to go just in between 12 and 14 to get 13. So now I'm going to take my ruler and line it up with the dots, and I'm extending this to at least the 7th term. So I think right now I've extended it to at least the 8th or 9th, and I will move my ruler and then I can look. Okay, here is 7, so 7 matches up with 22. So I could put a new dot here if I like for 22. So the 7th term is 22. Now for question number 4, I'm not going to go through everything with you, but I will start solving the first one. So it asks you to draw a graph to show how many toothpicks you would need for the 8th figure in the sequence. So you would be drawing your graph, and I'm just going to help you find the first few ordered pairs. So the first number in our ordered pair is going to be, which figure is this? So this is the first figure, this is the second figure, and this is the third figure. The second number in your ordered pair is going to be how many toothpicks are there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 toothpicks. So it would be 1, 4. That'd be my first ordered pair. The next one, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it would be 2 and 7. My last one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So when you're drawing your graph, you would plot these 3 points on it and then extend it to find the 8th figure. So where your x value along the bottom would be 8. So once again with question number 5, I won't do all of the work for you, but I'll talk about each part to try and help you know what the instructions are. So the scenario is that a car is traveling at a constant speed, so it doesn't change how fast it's going. It's always going 40 kilometers per hour. So that means in 1 hour it goes 40 kilometers. In 2 hours it goes 80 kilometers. In 3 hours it goes 120. Every hour it travels another 40 kilometers. Part A asks you to write an expression. So remember, an expression is a number sentence, so it could use numbers and variables, but there is no equal sign. For the distance the car travels in n hours. So when you're trying to figure out what variable to use in your expression, you should be using the letter n. Part B asks you to create a table of values for the distance the car has traveled after n hours. So you'll see they've used n hours here for the time and the distance traveled in kilometers. So they're giving you n hours. I think there's 5 spaces, so you just fill those in with the first numbers. How much does it travel in 1 hour? In 2 hours? in 3 hours, in 4 hours, and in 5 hours. So you would figure out if it's 40 kilometers for every hour, then in 1 hour it's traveled this much. So you would put that in. Maybe it's 40 kilometers for the first one. Okay, and then you would fill in the rest of your chart. Part C is going to ask you to write the ordered pairs for the table of values and then plot the points in the graph. So your table of values, it's always going to go first column and then second column. So it always go time, comma, distance. So for example, because we've already given you two numbers, our first ordered pair would be 1 hour and 40 kilometers. So then on your graph, you would go and find 1 and 40. So look at how they're dividing the scale. If the scale goes from 0 to 100, but there's 5 spaces, it means each of those probably represents 20 kilometers an hour. Now, the next part tells you to join the points with a straight line, and then if the car traveled 3.5 hours, how far would it go? Now, I have not drawn an actual graph, but I've given you just a little quick one here. When it's asking for 3.5 hours, your hours are along the bottom, so you would be looking halfway between 3 and 4. So it's like you'd look up at a straight line to see where it matches, and then go over to the side to see where it matches on the y-axis. So whatever number it matches up with there is your answer for how many kilometers. The final question asks you how many hours would it take the car to travel 320 kilometers. So extend the line to find out. So kilometers, you're going to be looking at the y-axis, which is your time traveled in kilometers, and then you'll see where that matches up with on your x-axis. So if you had another thing here and it went up, you'd look at where it's 320, you would match it up with the line, and then you would see where that matched up with on the x-axis, and the number of hours that you have there would be your answer. Question number 6 is going to have you create a few different graphs. So they have 3 different expressions for you: 4n plus 1, 5n minus 2, and 3n plus 9. So your job is for each of them to create a graph. So I'm just doing a rough sketch to show you where things are. So n will be your x value, and 4n plus 1 will be your y value. So what that means is if n is 1, and we know that 4 times 1 plus 1 is 4 plus 1 is 5, 3, 4, 5, your first point is going to go at 1 and 5. So then when n is 2, you would figure out what is 4n plus 1, so 4 times 2 plus 1 is 8 plus 1 is 9, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then it would connect there. So you would do that until you found the n values of 1, 2, 3, and 4. But they've asked you to leave some extra space because in future questions you will need to extend that graph. So you're making one of those graphs for each of these. Make sure that you label and number them so n is always on the bottom and the formula is on the side. Question B asks you to start by extending the line in each graph to evaluate each expression for n equals 6. So to do that, you would just connect the dots and keep them going. I know our graph doesn't go high enough, but then you would look at, okay, here's where n is 6. So you would line this up with your ruler until it met the graph and then go over to see what the y value is that it matches up with. And then your second step is to substitute n equals 6 into the expression. So when you have 4n plus 1, you would put 6 for n, which would give you 24 plus 1, which should give you 25. And you would check, hopefully, you would have had your graph match up with the number 25 for your y value when you had your line extension in your graph. Question 33 question C asks you to use the graph to find the value of n that makes each expression equal to 33. So what they're saying is when you have your graph, you would look at where you have 33 on your y-axis, and you would have your random line, and you would connect it to the line and then go straight down to find out what the x value is when y is 33. So you do that for each of the 3 graphs. Finally, question D asks you to write an equation and solve it to check your work for part C. So if you were to check the first question, the expression is 4n plus 1. And now to turn it into an equation, we need an equal sign, and we're trying to figure out what n value will equal, or x value will equal 33. So I'm going to help you solve this one. We need to start by getting rid of the thing that it's easiest to get rid of first. So we need to start by reversing BEDMAS, so we'll get rid of our addition, and we do that by subtracting the same amount. So we need to do that to both sides. So then 4n would equal 32. And now to get n on its own, 4n is connected by multiplication, so we need to divide. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, so it's just 1n, and 32 divided by 4 is 8. So when you did your graph, you should have gotten an 8 when you lined up 33 with your x value here. Then you would go and do that for each of your other ones. So you would check, okay, for number 2, 5n minus 2 equals 33. What would your n value be? And for number 3, 3n plus 9 equals 33. What would your n value be? And see if your graphs were correct. As always, there will be a Google form attached to this lesson, so fill it out. Remember to hit the purple submit button and the green mark as done button. I am checking all the Google forms every school day, so like Monday to Friday. So if your assignment still says no on fresh grade, it means it hasn't gone through. So go and try to fill out that form one more time and submit it to me, and I will update that mark for sure by the next day. And remember to ask for help if you need it in the comments. We're almost at the end of our unit, so this would be a good time to try and touch base with me if you need some help before we get towards a quiz.